Welcome, blockheads. It is, what is this? February 12th, 2025. This is episode 108 of Business on the Block. Today, we're going to tackle the AI power struggle. Will Musk's hostile takeover of OpenAI work? What is the big problem at the Global AI Summit? We'll explain to you why some nations are having a problem with agreeing on this thing. And are we about to see an AI-driven social platform? That's in the works. All this and more, we'll explain what's going on in the business world. I am joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Michelle Peterson-Clark.
Good afternoon, evening, and morning, everyone.
And Mike Neubauer.
I'll just stick with evening.
All right.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because America's the center of the world.
I'm going to take us into...
Lamar knows it.
Yeah. Story number one. A group of investors led by Elon Musk has announced an unsolicited offer to buy all of OpenAI's assets for $97.4 billion. Sam Altman has dismissed Musk's bid to buy OpenAI. The bid is specifically for control over OpenAI's for-profit arm. That is the one that runs ChatGPT. The unsolicited bid could set a new valuation for the ChatGPT maker's assets, and this would have impact during its transformation to a for-profit company. All right, we're going to start with thoughts on this one. Mike, I think we'll go to you first on this. Does this matter? Is this relevant? Is this Musk just being Musk?
Well, I mean, I think that he definitely wants to sink his claws into whatever technology pieces are out there, but I think he's having too much fun, divulging all of the corruption that has happened in the government side. Why not do it in alt AI as well, right? Or OpenAI as well. So obviously Sam doesn't want to, deal with this. He's got too many, $500,000 cars to protect. But look, where does this all end up in the grand scheme of things? And again, I think that our primary focus is to really relate this to the business owner. How can a business owner sort of gauge some of the information that we're spewing out here today? Well, if Musk takes it over, is there a direct integration between social and AI instantaneously due to the relationship with X? And if not, does this sort of push OpenAI into a different direction, perhaps a partnership with Facebook, perhaps a partnership with a different social platform, just to integrate and get their teeth into more of an application using other devices on the social platforms instead of just people relying on jumping into ChatGPT, for example, in order to interface with that system.
Michelle, I believe it was you who said to me in the chat this week that the children are not playing nicely in the sandbox. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, their playground dance this week has taken on a new level, I think. Yeah. Look, I mean, maybe we should have our conspiracy hats on, because there is a thought around that because Elon is actually suing OpenAI because of the non-profit thing, and how they started out and the money he put in was to make it open source and, to keep it as a non-profit and, kumbaya, good news for everybody kind of thing. So he's suing them for that. So one of the thought processes around that I've seen people comment on is that they think that Elon's doing this by to be able to inflate the valuation of what he could get as a payout in the legal case that he's doing. So there's that. I mean, obviously, though, they're at a particular level, these two do not like each other. And this is them just, we've seen it before, public spats. I mean, and we were talking about just before we went on air, Kendrick Lamar at the Super Bowl, halftime entertainment, and his spat with Drake was open and out on the lawn, so to speak, for all to see. So this is the tech equivalent of that, I think. Altman, Musk, they don't like each other, and this is how it's playing out. And, I agree with Mike. I think Elon's having a lot of fun running Doge and going through all sorts of things and being really quite powerful. And, perhaps some of that's gone to his head, so he thinks he can do it in another realm as well.
I'm going to pick up your thread and expand on what you say, because I agree with you. I think this is, first of all, Musk knows for sure Sam's never going to sell in this company. That was never on the cards. However, It's about the valuation it's gonna ultimately cost Sam more money to buy OpenAI's ChatGPT as a for-profit. And here's why. The valuation on the current company, I forget what it was, 150 billion, whatever, for OpenAI. They were roughly, loosely, Wall Street was valuing ChatGPT around $30 billion, which would mean Sam has to raise an investor group, cough up 30 billion, and he gets to take this thing into a for-profit. Great, easy enough. When Musk steps out of the shadows with almost $100 billion tag, which is way overpaying, but he knows that Sam won't sell it, so he's safe. This is like bidding on something at the auction, you're not going to get, you don't care. Sam now suddenly the price of that thing is jacked way the heck up to $97 billion. So they can't pay 30 billion for an asset that someone else was willing to pay 97 billion for. Sam now has to cough up another 60 billion bucks out of that investor group. And he will, because he doesn't want to sell it. So it's really Elon costing Sam 60 billion more dollars just to do it. And I think that's what's really going on. This is like, it reminds me of the private equity Wall Street stuff, like in the old days of Gordon Gekko, hostile takeovers, RJ Nabisco, all that.
Well, what's interesting, I think, is that, excuse me, if Altman calls Elon's bluff, he can do it.
Yeah. If Altman, well, when you say he calls his bluff, do you mean he sells it to Elon?
Yeah. I mean, we all know it's not going to work. And it may be that very reason that you guys are pointing out with the valuation component. But if Altman is like, you know what, I'm going to put your feet to the fire. Yes, I agree. I mean, Elon's worth 400 billion. I mean, like, there's nothing that's going to stop him from pulling this trigger as well. And then again, you're talking about a monopolization of some of these tech pieces that I think Elon is going to be able to run very fast with. You can literally take Grok and put it in hyperdrive when it comes to that.
And if you pair in what he's doing with Twitter in general, or X now, I mean, you'd get back the $100 billion, I think, with what Elon's other assets are. Easily.
It's interesting. Like, you in your description, you separated ChatGPT from OpenAI. So what other components of OpenAI would remain nonprofit?
Well, they have a foundation that does supposedly do gooder work. We'll say, and they also do research and development. Like they're essentially a research think tank. That's what they started out as. That's what Elon founded. But for those who don't remember, $50 million Musk wrote personally to found that thing? Yeah. And then it became a for-profit. Other than ChatGPT, OpenAI, which is the company, doesn't have a product. I agree with you, Mike. Like they will have products, which we hit the long listeners of the show know. Last week we talked about 20 different things they're thinking about in the hardware business. But meanwhile, you're right. Right now it is all ChatGPT, and that thing is on wobbly legs because of DeepSeek.
Okay, so here's a Wall Street question for you. How is it possible that you can establish an entity as a nonprofit, raise capital off of that, and then all of a sudden decide after the capital comes in to shift it into a for-profit entity? How the hell is that legal?
This has never happened before. We've never seen this. No. Like I can tell you, there are nonprofits that are run, but I believe it or not, what's the Rolex watch is a nonprofit. If you go Google this.
Well, like the NFL is a nonprofit.
Right. And they all make money. We know that. But they don't change there's a whole series of ways you have to manage that so you don't pay taxes. However, a flat out for-profit is much easier to just issue shares and run it like a company. And I think that Sam is trying to take the path never taken before because it opens the door later on for what they can do. But Elon knows this and he's going to put a stop to it. So this is literally two billionaires, bickering.
I understand. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the legalities of setting up an entity like that.
It goes to the courts. That's all. And the courts will decide.
Well, I wonder if that plays into his lawsuit against them.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like this shines a light on a whole bunch of legal gray area. Number one, to your point, Mike, you raise a very good point. Like you can't just flip a nonprofit into a for-profit. It doesn't work that way because there's a charter. There's a legal. Number two, there's separate from all that, there is a lawsuit that Elon funded this thing, started it, and then he was lied to effectively in his view anyway. Sam feels that the greater good, that he's got an investor group, that what Elon did in the beginning was great, but isn't necessary anymore. So like that'll go to the courts. All of this is connected. I don't know how it plays out, but I mean, Elon doesn't care because on the one hand, if it comes his way for 97 billion, he'll just tie it into what he's building otherwise. And if it doesn't, he's cost Sam $60 billion extra.
Okay, but even with that contract that he had for 50 million, like I'm sure there was terms in that had some sort of a deliverable, even as a nonprofit.
That's the lawsuit.
Okay,
that's exactly breach of contract is what Elon is suing him for. You agreed to these things and didn't, and that's not what we're looking at now.
So tell me then, I mean, you know, we've done lots of stories on this over the time, but he must have had the idea of this when he started raising funds, because Microsoft would not give, was it $10 billion if it was to a non-profit? I mean, these companies are investing in this stuff because they think they're going to make money from it. Like, I mean, that's a given. And so, yeah. Go on.
I think you're right, Michelle. I think this will all come out in the court proceedings, but there's no way Microsoft would only have given that money had they known that the plan was to flip it for profit. So then there has to
tells me it's been done before.
No, it hadn't been done, but it tells you that's Elon's argument of, well, if you were going to flip this thing to for profit, you had plans, you were raising capital with investors to do this and never told me when you had agreed that this is you can see the argument. So the courts, the problem is Sam knows what I know. In the end, the money always wins, right? So this thing's going to be, as a for profit, there's too many hands getting greased. Elon, though, has a leg to stand on. So I don't know how it happens, but it's, to my knowledge, Mike, it's never been done before. Actually, this is in an AI world, we can figure this out. But
well, I was going to say, way, OpenAI's lawyer is probably a ChatGPT bot.
Sam's such a good guy. Apparently, he doesn't earn any money from his work at OpenAI. So I'm not quite sure who's buying the cars that he drives around in. Maybe they're company cars. I don't know.
I'd love to see Elon do an audit of Sam and see what layers of onions keep getting pulled back.
So it looks like in the hospital space, Mike, there have been nonprofit hospitals that have converted to for-profit, and this has only been in the last 10 years. So there is precedent for it, but never at this scale, never in the tech space, and never when there was a personal loan that started the company.
That's so shocking to me. Like I would think that like companies like Facebook, even in the early on stages, were not set up corporate, set up properly.
Well, they weren't set up to be set up as a nonprofit is a very specific legal thing. It's got to do. Yeah. You can set up as an entity, no big deal. LLC, S corp, all that stuff. I mean, they're different.
I set up nonprofits all the time. I know the differences between them, right? There's specific requirements that are sort of in play with it. And then of course, at the end of the year, you have to show no profit. Now you can funnel that funds wherever you need to, but I think the infusion of cash that OpenAI came up with, I mean, they couldn't keep sweeping that under the we don't take profit rug anymore.
Well, time out though, but Bezos did something similar with Amazon back in the late 90s. If you were talking about he was raising capital, losing money, but everyone was plowing money into it. But that wasn't a nonprofit at the time.
I know. So within the nonprofit entity, you need a board, you need a mission, you need all these different things, and you need to show proof of where the funds go according to the mission that's on file. That's really the perimeters that you got to play within. And again, like I'm sure they could have crafted the documentation using AI to fit and check all the boxes.
I'm sure they did.
But yet figure out a way to convert it. I'm interested to see how all this plays out. But again, like from a business perspective, we really want to focus on how does this impact people's using ChatGPT or even any chat bot for that matter that is open sourced or closed sourced in order to enhance their business, their infrastructure, and their digital operations.
My thought on that is if it ends up in Elon's hands, there's a lot there for folks to benefit. If it ends up as it is now, nothing changes.
Nothing changes is right, except that, again, we're sort of exposed to the fact that OpenAI was just never about for that greater good. It was all about for that profit, which is not a problem. It's just that they sort of raised money under the guise that it was different.
Agreed.
Well, I mean, we think that they've raised money under the guise that it was different. I'm guessing that Sam has gone to these people, to Microsoft's and, all those others that have given them, what were they getting $1 billion a day for a while? He would have been going to say, we're non-profit now, but don't worry, I'm working on becoming a profit. You're going to make huge money. That would have been
totally see that.
I'm sure the pitch deck had that in it.
Right.
But you see, again, there are very specific legalities when it comes to raising capital like that. That's what's shocking to me about this whole situation.
Well, Mike,
Even
things,
even things that you
Sam's
say to people in an effort to raise
of all
capital.
of us, isn't he?
there's the rules, and then there's the rules for the people that have billions.
Again, something in writing is what I'm more interested in because that's what lives.
All right,
The
I'm going to take
conversations and the handshakes don't.
I'm going to take us into story number 2. The UK and the US are refusing to sign an international agreement on artificial intelligence at a global summit in Paris. They are refusing because the UK government says it's not going to add its name. It's concerned about national security and, quote, global governance. The US, on the other hand, is just arguing too much regulation of AI would, quote, kill a transformative industry. So for two different reasons, but similarly, these are the two large AI development epicenters right now. And I'll throw China in there as well, but they're not having a problem with this. So you've got two of the three bigs right now saying they won't agree to an AI global governance agreement. Michelle, you're our closest representative to that part of the world. What do you think about this? What happens here?
So all of this has come about because of the regime change in the US. The UK were leaders in this, as the article says. You know, when Rishi Sunak was PM in the UK, they had the first international global, call it what you will, AI, let's, make sure it's all good for everybody summit. And, the UK were leaders in that. Now, this is a complete about face. And I put it down to the fact that they know that if they sign something like this, it's going to make all of their other dealings with the Trump government difficult, more difficult. And that's the reason why they've gone, oh, hang on, let's think about this for a while.
Mike, what do you think about this?
I mean, I'm trying not to get political with it. And frankly, I don't care what the UK does in reference to Trump being the president of this country. I think what this is really just intended to do is to create sort of a fair, open marketplace for development. And I think the US is still very much in play with that. Maybe we're a little bit behind because of, maybe just not jumping on it right away. But with respect to the way that this is going to evolve, I would put my cards in that, Trump's efforts here, again, not getting political, but just reading, the writing on the wall. He wants this to sort of be an epicenter similar to what the UK had been developing without us. And he wants us to catch up, and he wants us to, sort of be a go-to tech developer when it comes to these types of technology as time evolves.
I'm going to say that this is really a cultural schism. You've got, on the one hand, the European Union, which has generally been very rules-based. They are looking out for the safety of the development of the tech. I can understand the concerns. Obviously, we all know this. On the other hand, you've got the American, who culturally, let's move fast and innovate. Silicon Valley give no crap about what happens, as they just want to race to AGI here. So culturally is the problem. I don't think that it's going to change, though, Mike. To your point, there is new leadership here, and people, whether you like the guy or not, the United States is falling in line behind him. At least right now, it's early enough he's wielding the power. Michelle, you're right. The UK has been at the forefront of trying to protect the globe. It was the very first agreement internationally of how, let's at least keep an eye towards what are we developing and how is it going to impact humanity. However,
which we talked about on this show.
We did. Right. And but that was going to be my next point.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I mean, Elon was a big player in that, right? He was advocating for sort of an agreement in place to say, let's pull the reins before we start developing something that gets completely out of control. And we sort of lose the toothpaste as it's leaving the tube kind of thing. And again, we talk about the security implications about what AI is all the time, how the data that's driven from and to the source is literally going to be the next form of digital currency that evolves within the tech space. We don't know where that lives. We don't know where that's going to end up. So I'm curious if actually he had any influence on this decision, or if now he has a sort of a foot behind the Wizard of Oz curtain. Now he can sort of help guide the U.S. to become a stronger foothold within the tech world. I don't know. Again, whether we have an agreement in place with the UK or not, frankly, I don't think is relevant. I think that they're going to develop it the way they want. The U.S. is going to continue to develop it the way that they want or need. And the paths will cross at some point. China just is running 100 miles an hour blindfolded. They don't care who or what they step on. You can make the argument, I guess India is a big developer as well. But, again, all of these different iterations of the same technology is ultimately going to come around full circle. And it's all designed in a way to help benefit the ones that are creating it. And then, with the open source and with whatever else is out there, you can pick and choose which ones you like. It's just nothing different from a software or a software developing company that provides the same services.
I know we want to tie this back to the small business guy, and we will in a second, but I want to just draw attention to the fact that ultimately AI is related closely to military uses, whether we like that or not. And so and that is the UK's argument, by the way. And a lot of these countries view this as a potential next era of warfare. And so having it constrained and restricted by any international group is interesting.
They said the same thing about the internet.
And nuclear power. Like they're all in that category.
Well, nuclear power is a little different, but yeah.
Well, no, I mean, there's a lot of international agreement as to who can develop nuclear, weapons.
Yes, that's much different from a computer program. Both can have detrimental impacts on society.
I agree. I'm drawing the parallel that you can use it for good, you can use it for bad.
You could do that with everything.
Yes.
We could do that with this podcast. I could be the evil one.
I mean, you're not?
All right.
No, I'm for the good.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I think that it's important to think about, why this is happening now and why some countries are worried and some aren't anymore. When, effectively, if we looked at this 6 months ago, even, maybe 3 months ago, everyone kind of would have said that they're all on the same page. Now, as Mike said, we don't want to get political, but the landscape in the US has changed in the last couple of months. And, I think that there's a lot of countries, particularly the UK, because it's outside of the EU now, they don't have that protection anymore. There's a lot of countries that are worried about the effect of the policies that are going to come out of the US on their trade, on their, commodities markets, on, their own balance of payments and their GDP and all of that stuff. And so I think that while they may think that it's a good idea to have guidelines and things like that, because, it's been said before that they are in the UK's case, like they're just looking for the lead from the US. And, in some senses, it's a bit disappointing in that, I think that it's important that we do have some general basic agreements around the world about this technology. But, ultimately, I think that's the point that we will come at. But I guess the US are just wanting to see what they can develop and how they can be out in front first before they put some guardrails on it.
I agree with you. I'm a realist, though, and maybe because I come out of the finance world, I feel like folks who have the power are going to do what they're going to do, and that for good or for ill. And by the way, China's not going to stop either. So I don't. You're not wrong, Michelle, and I'm certainly not advocating that it should be willy-nilly, everyone go crazy, because we're already hurtling headlong into a bad place with AI, as in my opinion. But I don't see how any country gets constrained. The U.S. is going to accelerate that, but it wouldn't have changed anyway, because in secret, North Korea is developing their nuclear, weapons. It's that kind of thing. I worry that with that, I think Elon was right. We should have some sort of a long-term vision that we can't enforce it, but at least we're trying to get there. But yeah, looking that way. All right. Story number 3. In happier news, BuzzFeed is planning an AI-powered social media platform to, quote, spread joy. They're going to be this social platform will be built specifically to enable playful creative expression. It's going to be, quote, it will use AI to give users agency, end quote. I'm curious what that means. This new platform is still in the developmental stages, does not yet have an official name. Mike, we'll start with you. What is this fluff? What do we need to? Is BuzzFeed doing something cool, or is this just a nothing burger?
I'll tell you exactly what they're doing. They're developing the next 5-minute spotlight threads and throwing the term AI in it to get a little bit more traction to it. This has no legs. This has no merit, no bearing at all. Frankly, again, I'd be curious how they're raising money for this. But, we've seen these types of things come and go and disappear like a fart in a hurricane. It is extremely difficult to compete with the monster social media platforms that exist currently, let alone developing something from scratch, throwing a different set of icing and glaze on the cake and saying, we're better. You're not better. You're full of shit. And frankly, the AI component on this, all of these other social platforms are going to eat that up so fast that it's going to make these guys just completely become irrelevant in the social sphere.
Michelle, Mike thinks this is a crypto ape coin that's going to get rugged. What do you think?
Look, I love the sentiment, but I think it is a pipe dream. I actually, I don't know if you two did, but I actually read the whole letter at the end. Like, I'm never getting those 10 minutes back on my life, but I did read it. And, I have to say that I didn't disagree with almost anything that Johan says. No, is it Jon? Yeah, is it? How does he say his name? Yeah,
you're
Johan?
saying that you agree with the go for the joy thing?
No, what I'm saying is I didn't disagree with any of the things he said about how it's bad for the
social media,
that it's caused, and about how how the algorithms have worked, and that that they have lived on creating fear and anxiety and all of that stuff. I don't disagree with any of that. However, to quote Mike, that shit sells. To paraphrase Mike, probably not to quote him, that shit sells, and that's the reason why it's been successful. Someone, quite often you'll see, these days you'll see, oh, let's flood Facebook with pictures of our gardens so that we don't see all the bad stuff and whatever. Well, that works for about 5 minutes. And then, something will happen somewhere and someone puts a news story up and it becomes viral because, whether it's images of a plane crash or, a car accident on the M5 or, whatever. And that's the problem we've got, because ultimately we're all voyeurs. We all like to watch. We all like to look. And then we like to talk about it. And that's the reason why these platforms have been successful. And unfortunately, I just think, it might be great. There could be a BuzzFeed utopia out there. And there might be, 100,000 people that join. But there's not going to be 100 million people that do it.
Back in the 90s, there was a radio station in New York City, I think it was Jack FM, who tried to go to an algorithmic-based DJ concept. So they had no DJs in the station, and then the machinery would just pick the next song. It was the early days of algorithms. And it lasted about 3 months, and they flipped it back and hired a bunch of DJs. And I feel like it sounds great on paper. That's what BuzzFeed is doing right now with an AI-powered social media platform. God only knows where that ends us up. I agree with you both. This might be the only time all three of us have agreed right off the bat on a story. They're in trouble. BuzzFeed as a media property needs to do something. So if I'm a small business owner, or I'm thinking this is a new TikTok or I can try to leverage for attention, I would not be putting any money into this thing.
Well, it all boils down to, what Michelle had mentioned that we've talked about many times here, is the addiction of affirmation. And these social media platforms, and again, I'm old enough to remember a time when it didn't exist, or at least in the capacity that it does now. But these social media platforms have tapped into a human psyche that we didn't realize was as addictive and powerful and manipulative. So that same example that you provided, Michelle, where, I'm going to take a picture of my garden, there's going to be systems in place that will drop comments like, well, your garden is ruining, the ancestral life of the Voyager ant that claimed that land as its own. So, it's designed by its nature now to provide and spoke controversy. And
that's not new though, Mike.
It's not. But my point is that it's counter to everything BuzzFeed is trying to promote here. Nobody wants the white fences and the rainbows hopping around their social media platform. They want a reason to go back. And the only reason to go back is controversy. And if AI starts to learn our tendencies, I got bad news for BuzzFeed's AI algorithm. It's going to push people towards controversy because we know it works.
Their thought is that they would code it so it's an AI that only promotes joy.
Right. That is the most propaganda sentiment and statement I've ever heard in my life. I'm just
reading the copy here. Yeah, I know. I agree with you. There's a term in the world that people on social will know, rage bait. It works.
Yeah.
The old days. Good.
No, I was going to say, and as much as I, talk about how I hate it, if something happens or I see a headline, the first place I go is Twitter, to X, to find out what's going on, who's saying what, where is it, because that's what I guess I've been programmed to do. But also I know that's where I'm going to kind of get all sides of the ledger views on what's going on. So I'll look at CNN to Mike loves me doing that. But then conversely to that, I'll say, well, what are Fox News saying about that? So I can kind of get both without too much effort.
Mike, you go right to Threads, right, to figure out what's going on?
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna move us into the speed round at this point. We're gonna do unless last thoughts on that story. Anyone? This is gonna be a rapid fire one. This week in the speed round, OpenAI is building a chip of its own, a microchip. This is finalizing the design of its first in-house AI chip. It plans to send the design to Taiwan Semiconductor for fabrication within the next few months. As everyone knows, NVIDIA has been the only game in town right now with AI chips so far. So OpenAI is taking matters into their own hands. Thoughts around this one? Mike, we'll start with you.
Here we go with the hardware again. We've talked about this on many different occasions. The hardware battle is now going to be the next phase here. We talked about the software. We talked about the development and the protection of the software. Now it's going to be a matter of who can own and manufacture the ammunition to start the war.
Michelle, what's your thoughts on this? Is Mike right?
Yes, and I think that, frankly, Sam has looked at NVIDIA and said they're making way too much money. How can we cut some of their lunch? And this is one of the ways to do it.
Is it going to work?
Probably.
I'm not sure either. Yeah, I agree with you guys both.
Mike, designing a chip's not that difficult, is it?
If it weren't that difficult, I would have thought that Intel would be back in the game.
I'm positive that AI can assist in developing a system that's designed for itself.
That's probably true. That's a scary thought. T800, anyone? I do agree with you that, yes, this is supply chain integration. This is going to be very similar to what Amazon is doing, owning all parts of your business, basically is what this comes down to. I don't know. Do we want a world where OpenAI makes their own chips?
I think we're moving in that direction, whether we like it or not. I mean, whether OpenAI makes it or NVIDIA starts to create it. I mean, AI is going to be an efficiency tool that's designed for all levels of manufacturing, including the components of AI itself.
Interesting. All right. That's it for the speed round. It's time for us to don our tinfoil as we head into our favorite part of the program, Conspiracy Corner. All right, this week in Conspiracy Corner, AI chatbots are unable to accurately summarize the news. Mike, when I saw this story, I thought of you. The major AI chatbots are inaccurately summarizing news stories, according to new research from the BBC. This applies to all of them: ChatGPT, Microsoft's Copilot, Gemini, Perplexity. AIs were provided info from the BBC website and then asked questions about the news, and the answers contained, I quote, significant inaccuracies and distortions. Michelle, we'll start with you on this. What do you think? Is this first of all, is this true? Second of all, is it on purpose?
Oh, I'm sure it is true. On purpose. Don't know. We have talked about before that this is a tool, whether you use Claude or ChatGPT or Anthropic or like whatever, whichever one you use, it is a tool, and you should not holus bolus believe everything that comes out of it. So what that means when you use it as a tool is that you do need to have some knowledge of the subject matter so that you can kind of do your own fact checking, I guess. We know, though, that there's a lot of people out there who are not doing that. We know that there's a lot of people who have created whole businesses in the last 18 months around producing stuff in Chat GPT. Why is Mike dancing with
you're so close to seeing the light. The people that don't know what they're saying or know what they're doing are the actual news companies that AI is messing up the sourcing from.
Wait, continue, Mike. Expand on that.
Yes, jump in here.
Okay, so the first thought in my head when I read this is that they were unable to accurately summarize the news from the news sources that inaccurately summarize the news to begin with. This is
so a circular argument.
It's a circular argument of logic that just is destined to fail. And look, we're in conspiracy corner. And Mark, you pointed out something that triggered with me immediately after you said it. Could this be sort of on purpose? Could this be a ruse to sort of shed light that news organizations in general don't know what they're doing and have falsehoods? So now you need to rely on something like a Chat GPT to get your news. Go in, ask it, and let it source it out.
Okay, no. Let's talk about that now. No. Okay, so we don't know the exact parameters of this study, okay? So if the study was, read these 5 articles and summarize what they say, this failed, okay, based on the data that we've received from it. Now, that whether or not the summary was more factual than the articles is a completely different proposition for a study. Like, they are not the same things.
Who's conducting the study?
BBC. The term that they use, though, and I'm quoting again.
Who's conducting the study?
The BBC.
The news source?
Yep. They said that it was distorted, like significant inaccuracies and distortions. So it got some of the news right, but it didn't get it right. Now, you're right. Good point here, Mike. What does that really mean?
They looked in the mirror. That's all they did.
Well, there is something to be said for about factual components of news. And I know we'll argue bias in a moment, but the news happened in a certain geography on a certain day, right? There's truth in news in that regard. So is it getting that piece wrong? Because that's concerning. Or is it the spin, which is what you're getting at, Mike, where, you know, two people see the same event and there's 2 different versions of it?
If we're talking about the date and time of a specific event in question, I mean, God, I hope that at least BBC can get that part right.
Right.
Well,
and I would.
Okay. Yeah. No. Look, let's look at what some of the inaccuracy stuff was, and you can probably, work back to what the questions were. Chat GPT and Copilot said that Rishi Sunak and Nicola Sturgeon, she was the First Minister of Scotland, and he was the PM in the UK until the election in, I think it was May last year, were still in office even after they had left. Now, there's no way the BBC have written articles in the last 6 months that indicate the 2 of them are still in power. They may have referenced them as previously being in those positions. So from that point of view, it's wrong. It isn't that the BBC.
No, and I'll tell you exactly how it works. It works as the same manipulation as any AI tool. So if there's anybody left over from those administrations that are still having an impact in the government, those were appointed by those individuals. The AI component, while inaccurate in the fact that they are in power now, still have an influence due to the fact that there's personnel implementing changes while they were in power. So it is proper in referencing the fact that their power and their influence is having an impact today, even though they're not in charge.
Okay, here's my thoughts on the matter. I think as of this early stage in the AI development, this is just the machines not getting the stuff right. Like that, I don't think this is on purpose. I think that it's clunky. However,
you talking about AI or the news?
The AI.
The argument works for both.
The argument about the news is valid. However, it also points to that larger issue that you just raised here, Mike. I think that if you can't quote unquote control the spin, then you have a problem if that's your job. And so the news organizations, for good or ill, left or right, I'm not taking sides, they all have a spin. We know that. We've seen this with the social media bubbles. And so now we have to have an actual global conversation around news. And this is going to become more the issue. There'll be a crowd will gather to protest Donald Trump's election or non-election. And then it's either a riot or it was a support group. Like, it depends on who you ask. So my point is, people are going to have to come to terms with the fact that news is biased now. And we know it. So what is AI supposed to do in that case? Let's assume AI is neutral. It needs to be giving the version of what? Of whose?
Well, I mean, there's two sides to every opinion, and then there's the truth. If we sort of understand what AI is capable of, we don't necessarily need to create a version. It's just the version. The opinionated version is sort of left to the devices of people making the distinction after they receive the facts. But, I think that, the history books are written by the victor regardless. We've seen AI in its evolution have human fingerprints all over it. We've seen filters put in between the input and the output that can generate a specific output of counter to what people were looking for, i.e. Santa Claus and George Washington, right? So, we are very much, and especially on this show, me in particular, I am extremely skeptical that there are still tremendous amounts of fingerprints on these AI technologies. That sort of, with the conspiracy hat on, validates the comment that you made earlier on whether this was intentional or not, just to sort of devalue what we've sort of been trained to accept as truth using the news. But more and more, as different things are being sort of uncovered, we're recognizing that the news in its very nature is false. And it's really driven to provide a specific narrative one way or another. Michelle, you alluded to this earlier. You watch, the crap news network, and then you also watch the other crap news network to get, some sort of a valid point on what the particular opinions or issues are. But the truth is, wouldn't you be much more suited knowing that you, in your four walls of your life, if you can just take in the facts and not have an opinion associated with those facts, sort of construct your own narrative just based on the actual truth?
But Mike, in real life, that's not going to happen. And you're right. But I'm going to go back to something Michelle said earlier. When she doesn't know what's really happening, she goes to X. And I think that the reason you go to X, Michelle, if I may speak for you, I'm guessing, is you're going to get the panoply of opinions, the crazies on both sides, and you have the brains to figure out what's the truth in the middle.
Yeah.
But once again, we're talking about people's input. If this people's input is replaced by an output that is generated by AI, let's just call it factual based, can't she figure out her own opinion from there instead of being influenced in one argument versus the other?
So I heard a comment from, I think it was Mo Gadot, one of the tech leaders in Silicon Valley, was saying that with the one answer AI spits out, whatever it may be, and we all see it, we still think in terms of Google, where you're going to get hundreds of responses and you have to figure it out. With the one singular answer thing, you now have the homogenization of all of society globally, because we'll all start to understand it happened this way or that way. And so the argument is happening now, like, well, which way is it? This is where this is going to lead.
And that leads into all of the stuff we've talked about of who's behind the curtain pulling the strings. Like, what are the AI bots being fed in the first place? But in regards to this, and going back to this and thinking about how this, relates to using AI tools as a business, and we've talked about them as being tools, not being, God's gift to information and facts of everything. One of the things that the article talks about is that what the AI couldn't distinguish between were opinion pieces in on the that the BBC produced, as opposed to the news pieces. So, I mean, obviously, opinion pieces are like, if you go to CNN or Fox News, there are particular people, left and right or whatever, that have opinions and see things through a particular lens. But the AI bot couldn't distinguish between facts that were the opinions of a particular author of an article as opposed to the news story of the thing. So what that means is that as business owners and as humans, we need to look at the stuff that AI gives us and use our critical thinking skills and work out whether or not like if it looks fishy, then we need to do some more digging and work out what's going on.
Why did it take AI for us to start this critical thinking adventure? Right? Like,
it hasn't, but it's amplified now, isn't it? Because there are, as I said before, there are so many people now that have created businesses in the last 18 months that take everything the AI bots say as read, produce ebooks, courses, sell them to people, and then, half the people don't even read what the chat GPT has bloody created for them.
I have a thought exercise.
You in Sports Illustrated.
So, for those following the Mars colonization concept that Elon has proposed, one of the ideas he has floated, and this is the true part, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, that we need to warm the planet up if humans are going to colonize, and one of the ways to warm up Mars would be to drop nuclear bombs on the poles, which would end up globally heating the planet, melting the ice, creating liquid water, etc. So, is that good or bad? It depends who you ask. My point is, I can see where the machines would get confused, Michelle. It's no different from the way it was in the old days when people would just immediately interpret this is terrible. Is inflation
like
good or
watching
bad?
the news? We've come to learn is that the news was never the news. Really. The news was always opinion. We just believed for some reason that it was factual based. But look back at every news article from back in the day. It was all opinion based, regardless on which way you looked at it.
My kid is studying economics, and he came home. They're doing inflation right now. And I said to him, is inflation good or bad? And he was like, well, it's bad. And I'm like, well, what if you own nothing but commercial real estate that's paying you cash every month? And you can raise your rents now. He's like, well, I guess then it'd be good. I'm like, right. So like,
depends which side of the ledger you're on, doesn't it?
That's my point with the news. Right. Yeah. So the Tiananmen Square was bad news for the Chinese government, but good news if you were trying to get out from under them. Anyway,
everything's a matter of perspective. And, unfortunately, fortunately, I should say, everybody is living a different life. So things impact people differently at different times.
I'm gonna remove our tinfoil at this point. Good debate as always. I always worry about when we bring up Conspiracy Corner having to do with the AI, Mike, because I know you're gonna get hot. All right, a quick recap of what we did this week, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on what are the takeaways. Stories we tackled: Altman dismisses Musk's bid to buy OpenAI. Story 2 was the U.S. and UK not signing the International AI Declaration. BuzzFeed is planning an AI social platform. And then, of course, we hit a couple of quickies there with custom chips and some inaccurate news. What are the key stories we need to know about this week that we talked about? Michelle, we'll start with you. What do you think is the most important thing we hit?
I think that not necessarily the most important, but a commentary of, I don't think we'll hear about the BuzzFeed social thing again.
Flash in the pan?
It'll go by the way of threads?
It won't even be a threads where they'll be able to say so many people joined in such the world's history shortest time. I think that it will just die a slow whatever. But I think that the Altman Musk court case about the non-profit of Chat GPT will be a test case and a marker for a lot of the other stuff that comes after it in terms of AI development and how people can make or not make money from it.
Mike, what's our big takeaway from the week?
I think that argument, Michelle, is a little bit more on the theoretical side. I'm going to take more of a potential practical side with the hardware and the chips. And I think that, again, this is going to be the next evolution of where this technology goes. We saw it with the internet. We saw processors, need to get additional speed. We saw different, components in the hardware that needed to get developed faster. I think this is just the next evolution of the AI phase. And there's an industry for that. And there's a market for that. And I'm hoping that Trump sees that as well. And, that sort of links into the relationship or lack thereof of what he, had in place with the UK and why that didn't get signed. I think that they're, in addition to the software, which is a proven model at this point, there's no denying that. we also have to factor in much of the hardware conversation, which includes raw materials, which includes manufacturing, which includes jobs, and which includes different efficiency tools that businesses can apply to further enhance their operations and what they need AI for.
Love it. I think from my perspective, I'm going with Michelle's take here. The Altman-Musk argument, from a perspective of developing the tech, I believe that ChatGPT is the lead horse in the AI race right now. It's an American company, and those two men have two very different philosophies about how AI should be used. And I think that there's implications for not just the small business community, clearly there would be, but for all of us. As I don't think it'll end up in Musk's hands, but I really think it would change the directional movement of the world if it were to happen. All right. That's all we got for this week. Everyone, want to thank everyone for listening. Special shout out to the Bolt Nation. As always, we appreciate the support. Thank you guys. We come every week live on LinkedIn and YouTube. And we are back next week, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. Michelle, is it 8:30 a.m.?
a.m. Thursday.
Getting there.
Yes, very good.
You'll figure it out right as the time changes.
Right.
Yeah,
We're doing
right.
So the purpose of this program is to give you some insight into the digital business revolution, is how we term it. But it's basically, if you're a small business owner, if you're a creator, solopreneur, if you're trying to just understand what these changes are in the world of business and how you can benefit from them, we think an actual conversation every week brings a little more light, not just what happened in the news, but what does it mean? Because there's no place to go to get this information. So we appreciate all the comments. We respond to everything. And final thoughts from my two colleagues here.
Follow us on BuzzFeed.
Bye.
Take care, everybody. Hold on a second. I can't find our new outro.